so we can still go back to our chart if we need to, so we know what our steps are. Lucas, will you remind us what our first step is?
Move everything to the side.
Exactly, so we're gonna move everything to one side. So this time we do have something to move over. Okay, so Jory, what's my new equation now?
2x squared
Plus 1x, and what was the last thing you said?
minus 1.
Yep, minus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. So you have to subtract that over. Okay, what are we gonna, Caleb, what are we gonna try to do next?
Factor.
We're gonna factor. Don't be intimidated by the coefficient. This is actually really nice because 2 is a prime number. So the only way I can multiply to 2 is if I have what and what?
2 and 1.
2 and 1. So it has to be 2x and x. This is also nice because my last number is prime. It's negative 1. The only way I can multiply to negative 1 is if I have a 1 and a negative 1. We just have to decide where does the positive 1 go, where does the negative 1 go. So make sure that you are checking it. If I want my middle number to be positive, okay, then where is the positive 1 going to go? With the 2x or the x? Let's try something. Okay, if I do negative 1 here and positive 1 here, I can check it using FOIL. Remember I told you I do the happy face? So this would be negative x. On the outside, 2 times 1 is positive 2. What's negative x plus 2x? 1x, right? Isn't that what I wanted? Yep, so then that's good. If I got the opposite, if I had a negative x, I would just have to flip those two signs. Okay, so now step 3, I'm going to find out what values would make it 0. So with the x plus 1, you guys can look at that and tell me, right? What would make that 0? Okay, you guys with me? Okay, so if it's x plus 1, what would make that 0? Negative 1. I know some of you can also look at the second one and you'd be able to tell me as well. But if you cannot tell right away because that one is a little more complex, just go ahead and set 2x minus 1 equal to 0 and then just solve. So we'd add 1 to both sides, divide by 2. Okay, so x would be 1/2. So my two values would be negative 1 and 1/2. Questions for me? Okay, so when you're putting these on your number line, you have to make sure you put them in their correct numerical order. Okay, and Mitchell, will you explain to me how you know whether or not it's going to be hard brackets or soft brackets?
Except greater than or equal to.
So, and what does that mean?
That's like inclusive. That can include like the -1 on the number line.
Okay, so then my brackets are going to be,
Hard.
yep. Okay, so because of the equal to, it's inclusive, so I have to have my hard brackets. And then, Mitchell, will you just tell me what my intervals are?
-50 to -1.
Yep.
Then -1, 1/2,
Yep.
and 1/2 to infinity.
Perfect. Okay, how do we do on that? Do well? Okay. Let's go ahead and put those in our chart then. And feel free to do the chart. I know some of you probably already did. That's great. And then the sign of, I'm going to put my 2 factors here. Okay, so let's do some test points. Ken, you want to give me some test points for these?
The first one, -2.
Sounds good.
Second one, 0.
Good.
Third one, 1.
Sounds great. Okay, so again, you can use whatever test points you want. When you're doing this on your homework, you don't even have to tell me what you plugged in. You can just write now your plus and your minus signs. Okay, so I want you to give that a try if you haven't already. once you do that, think about whether you are going to use the positive intervals as your solution or the negative. And if you have more than one interval, when you're writing it out, do you guys remember how to connect them? Union. Hey, it looks like you guys are doing an excellent job. All right, so when I plug in -2, I'll have -4 minus 1, which is -5, so negative. Here I get -2 plus 1, which is also a negative. When I multiply two negatives, I get a positive. When I plug in 0, I will have -1. When I plug in 0 for the second, I will have a +1, and that would leave me with a negative product. When I plug in 1, I would have 2 minus 1, which is a +1. 1 plus 1 is a +2, which will leave that positive. Okay, so Charlie, can you tell me if we want the positive or negative intervals and how you would figure that out?
You'd want the positives
That's
because
correct.
in step 1 it is greater than or equal to 0, so that means all positive numbers.
Good. So you have to ask yourself, is this greater than 0? Are positive numbers greater than or equal to 0? Or are negative numbers greater than or equal to 0? So because of this symbol, because it's greater than or equal to 0, we want the positive intervals. And that's okay that there are 2 of them. Okay, so what we will do is we will just highlight both of those. And then we're going to go ahead and write out our solution. Okay, so I have 2 intervals, so I'm going to connect those with a union, -infinity to -1, union 1 to infinity. Again, I just ask that you put those above so that I can see clearly whether or not you have an open circle or a closed circle and what those numbers are. Okay, so then this means any number from -1 to -infinity should make that a true statement. Okay, same thing with any number from 1/2 to positive infinity. That should make it a true statement. Okay, let's say we choose 1. Okay, we'll just check it real quick. If we plug in 1 squared times 2 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3. Is 3 greater than or equal to 1? Yep. I would also try one from the other interval, like -2. -2 squared is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 8 plus 2 is 10. That's still going to be greater than or equal to 1. It makes it true, so those are both good.
So like the actual answer you would, like, that we're boxing in for is the solutions? Is like,
Yes. Are the 2 intervals.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. Right, so since we know these produce a positive result, this is the interval that will yield a positive result, and this is the interval that will yield a positive result that will make those true. All right, let's go to the next one, which is x cubed minus 8x squared is greater than or equal to -15x. Okay, so see if you can do the first few steps. Well, I know some of you will be able to do it all. Go ahead and do it all if you can. factoring this, this one's a little special, right? So if you're following your factoring rules, what's the first thing you should do? Good, okay, so did you guys find the greatest common factor? Okay, great. If you didn't, just go back and factor that out. And again, remember that when you're moving this over, you're adding it to both sides. So be careful there. Sometimes people just move it, but remember, in order to move it over, we have to add it, and that's how we get the 0. Okay, so Blake, what was our greatest common factor for this? What goes into both x cubed, negative x, 8x squared, and 15x?
X,
X. So if I factor that out, Blake, tell me what I have left.
you have X and then, X minus 3. Right?
Oh, tell me what I have left if I just factor out the x.
Oh, it'd be X squared.
Yep.
Okay, and then you have minus 8X.
Yep.
And then plus 15.
Good. Yes, and then we're gonna break this one down. Okay, so I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to a positive 15 but add to a negative 8. What are those numbers? Negative 3, negative 5. Good. And then I have to find my values for x that would make that 0. Okay, so what would I plug in for this one? X minus 5. What would make that 0? 5. What about x minus 3? 3. Am I done? No, because you have x. And what could I plug in for x that would make it 0? 0. Okay, so you're trying to find all of the different numbers that would make this expression 0. Okay? So now I'm going to put them on the number line. What order do they have to go in? Least to greatest, right? Okay, so my smallest number is 0. My next number is going to be 3. My next number is going to be 5. So how many intervals am I going to have? 4, so I better do some construction on my sheet here. I'm just going to, I'll split this middle one in half. Okay, so I will have 4 intervals. And then when I'm making my intervals for this one, Michaela, can you tell me if I'm going to have hard brackets or soft brackets?
Hard,
Good. How did you know?
because it's, greater than or equal to.
Good. So you have the greater than or equal to, which tells you you're going to have hard brackets. And at this point, you can also tell me, right, are you looking for positives or negatives? If it's greater than or equal to 0, positives. Okay, so then we're going to write our intervals across the top. And now we're going to have 3 factors. So we have x, x minus 3, and x minus 5.
We should have 3 signs.
Yes. Okay, so now that we have 3 factors, we are going to have 3 signs. Let's get some test points. Shauna, what are some good test points?
Negative 1,
Okay,
1,
good.
4,
Sorry.
and 6.
Good. Now, when you're picking test points, be careful. Do you see how 0 is included in both of these? That's going to be an indeterminate point, so do not use it. Same thing here. Even though it's gonna be a closed bracket, both of these are not gonna work. Okay, so you have to be careful. You don't wanna choose 3. Okay, same thing here. You don't wanna choose 5. Okay, so pick something in between those. Okay, so Sam, walk me through this one. Tell me what you did.
Alright, so this -1 plugged into x, this is gonna be a negative, so you
Yeah.
have negative for the first. You're gonna have a negative for the second, and a negative for the third.
Okay.
That will be negative though, because you'll have 2 negatives multiplied by each other will be positive.
Exactly. So a negative times a negative is a positive times a negative will be a negative. You can also use the information in that first box. Do we have an odd or even amount of negatives? We have an odd amount, so then we know the result will be negative. Okay, are you guys feeling comfortable with the chart? Okay, so then if you plug in 1, you'll have a positive, a negative, which will result in a positive. For 4, you'd have 4, 1, and negative, which would result in a negative. And then you have positive, 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 which would result in a positive. And then you are taking the positives. Okay, so again, there's more than 1, which means we're going to connect those with a union. So when I write out my solution, okay, my solution is going to be this interval 0, 3. And from 5 to infinity, do not hard brackets there. So 0, 2, 3, 5. And I would have closed circle, connect, closed circle, arrow to the right. Okay, and again, you can plug that back into check. So anything between 0 and 3 and 5 and above should make a true statement for our original. All right. Ready for the last one? I'm also going to show you on this one how you can save time by making your charts. Okay, so we have 6 plus x over 6 minus x is greater than or equal to 1. Okay, so your first step is always the same. We want everything on one side. Okay, so that right side should be what number? 0, but we don't have that, right? So what do we have to do with the 1? Subtract it over. This is where the fun starts. Okay, so when you subtract it over, you're going to have 6 plus x over 6 minus x minus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. Now, on the first page, they talked about on your non-zero side, if you have 2 different terms, you're going to have to combine them with a common denominator. So for this, your common denominator is going to be what? 6 minus x. So that's like exactly what we did in 1.4. See if you guys can make that into one term. So multiply to get your LCD. I'm sorry, I know you don't have a ton of room there. I'm just going to write this on here so I can write it nice and big for you. So if you have 6 plus x over 6 minus x minus 1, think of it as 1 over 1. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by 6 minus x. What I would do is I would change this like minus sign in between to a plus, and then I would distribute the negative to both of these. Okay, so then you'd have 6 plus x over 6 minus x plus negative 6 on top plus x. So a negative times a positive is a negative times a negative is a positive. And now I can just go ahead and I can add straight across because I do have a common denominator. So 6 plus a negative 6 is 0. X plus x is going to be 2x. So I'm going to have 2x over 6 minus x is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so that is exactly what we did in 1.4. Okay, so I'm just going to write the 2x over the 6 minus x there. How did you guys do with that? That 1.4 is getting solid? And maybe some of us need a little more practice. Questions for me before I move on to the next one? Okay, your factors for the quotient is just going to be the numerator and the denominator. Okay, so my factors are already right here. My factors are 2x and 6 minus x. So I can just put these in my chart right now, the 2x and the 6 minus x. Okay, those are going to be my factors. Now, we want to find out what would make this 0. So for 2x, what would I plug in to make 2x 0? 0. Is that okay? What would my other value be? It would be 6, right? Because 6 minus 6 would be 0. Why is that a problem for this? It's in the denominator, and if I have 6 in the denominator, what happens to the whole thing? It's undefined, right? Okay? So when we are writing this out, and we're deciding whether or not we have hard brackets or soft brackets, we're going to have to look back up here. Well, this tells me I have hard brackets, but this cannot be included. So for this one, you're going to have hard brackets, except for 6, because then the denominator would equal 0. Okay, so this is the type of situation that I told you about earlier where you're going to have a mix of hard and soft brackets. Okay, so it's really only with your fractions that you're going to have that mix, and that's because of the denominator not being able to be 0 and get a valid answer. Okay, so I'm still going to split this up like I did before. So I'm going to have 0 and I'm going to have 6. Oh, and then I'm also going to show you, I told you I'd show you how to do this on your homework paper so you don't have to keep writing out the chart. Okay, so you'd have 0 and you'd have 6, and then you would do your intervals. So negative infinity to 0, hard bracket, 0 to 6, 6 would be the soft bracket. Okay, so negative infinity to 0, 0 would be the hard bracket, 0 to 6, 6 is going to be the soft. And then from here, you can just do your chart. You can just write your two factors on the side, 2x and 6 minus x. If you want, you can do it like that, and you can put those lines down there, that's fine. You don't even have to if you don't want to. Okay, but then you don't have to physically draw a chart every time. Nobody's got time for that. It's a lot faster. Okay, so again, you're going to choose a number between negative infinity and 0. Let's try negative 1. So if I plugged in negative 1, I'd have a negative 2. If I have 6 minus negative 1, I really have plus 1, which would be 7. And so I only have one negative, which means the product is going to be negative. Okay, and then for this one, I'll plug in 2. So this would be positive, this would be positive, that would be a positive, this one, I'll plug in 7. So I would get a positive and then a negative, which would be a negative. And then do I want a positive or a negative for this one? A positive. So we did have more positives than negatives today, but again, remember, it all depends on the sign. So because this is greater than or equal to 0, you're looking for the positive intervals, or interval. So then your solution, sorry, that's hard to see. Your solution is going to be 0 to 6. You will have a closed circle at 0. You will have an open circle at 6, and you will connect those together. So your solution, if I plugged in 0, would that be a true statement? Yeah, because it's inclusive, right? If I plugged in 6, would it be true? Nope, because this is saying it doesn't include it. Okay, so that is what you want. All right, other questions for me on that? How are you guys feeling about today?
Good.
Good. Okay. I'm going to give you your homework. All right, so this was 1.7, which is on page 80. And then you guys are doing 35 through 40, 49 through 51, and 57. Your homework key is already posted for you. And then I will also post a link to this video in Google Classroom.